Hello, we're here at William Harris Homestead today, and I'm going to do a little lecture on the evolution of the brown Bess musket, basically going from the inception to right past the American Revolution. So to start with, grab this gun here. This is not a brown Bess. This is not a brown Bess musket. This is actually a Fowler that was, it's based on one that was built about 1750, but the guys used scavenged parts, and one of the lock is actually from a pre-brown Bess military musket, a Queen Anne style musket with a dog lock. The dog lock can be, because when you go to put it on half cock, you've got to hold it with your finger to get it in there. It's kind of a little bit awkward. But anyway, this is the earlier pre-1720 style lock. So before the 1720s, the way the British military is set up, the colonel of the regiment would procure his arms, the guns for the guys. There was no set standard, so you had all different kinds of calipers, all different barrel lengths. All the guns they weren't standardized. King George II, he set out and to improve his military, he had them set a standard for what we know as the land pattern King's arm. It's known as the land pattern because the Navy used the sea pattern. Now this particular gun, this is actually a little bit later, but anyway, it was adopted in 1728. You see, it doesn't have the dog lock, it actually has the half cock function, which is easier to load and safer because you don't have stuff going off half cock. It's heavily carved. Now, the one thing that makes this an 1740s pattern is this one has a steel rammer. The earlier ones, the 1728s to into the 1740s, had wooden rammers. They had issues with the wooden ramrods breaking, so they decided they would go with a steel rammer. Although late in the 1740s, some of the British colonels wanted to go back to the wooden ramrod because they would use the steel ramrod to scour the barrels with, and they were wearing the barrels down and wearing the ramrods out. So some of them wanted to go back to the wood, but evidently they did not, because these are structurally tighter. Anyway, this is the 1742 variation. The earlier 1728 looked almost exactly the same except with a wooden rammer and a little bit larger ramrod thimbles. The next gun I want to talk about, and I've got two of them here, is this shorter version. A lot of people, when they say, oh yeah, these are the Ranger guns, these are actually artillery musketoons. But where that one had the heavy carving, this one's simpler. Still retains the side plate of the larger size. This one has the wooden rammer because these were adopted about 1736 as a shorter weapon, because your artillery men would be riding on the horses that are actually pulling the cannons or riding in the wagons and stuff. They needed a shorter, handier gun. This was like a backup weapon because their main job was to fire the cannons. So this was just like a shorter defensive weapon. The next thing we want to come to is the 1756 pattern. There was a 1747 or 48 pattern that looked just like this gun, except it has a brass nose cap put on it. During the French and Indian War in 1756, because they were having to build many more muskets, because what was French and Indian War here turned into the 7 Years' War in Europe. They were needing a lot more muskets made, so they simplified the guns by getting rid of a lot of the carvings on them. So you still have the same The same brass furniture, same lock, still keeping the 46-inch barrel, but they simplified the carving so you was a little bit quicker in making the stocks. And then when you get to 1768, this one here, we have what is known now as the second model, or the short land pattern. The first one was just called the land pattern until this one came in 1768. They shortened the barrel by 42 inches. They simplified. This one does have a little bit of carving, and that's optional onto the gun makers, but your brass work is a little bit simpler. The side plate here is flat where the other one was domed. That saves a little bit of money. Shortening the barrel saved a little bit of money. Now this gun was actually based on an earlier commercial version called the Militia and Marine musket, that was actually starting to be built in the 1750s. And you'll see this go on through the life of the Brown Besses as things change a lot of times, because this was the King's pattern. This is what was approved for military use. But your militias, not the Royal Marines, but for Marine use, meaning any sailors on the merchant ships and stuff, they had to provide their own arms, so they were looking for something a little bit cheaper than the basic military gun. Still 75 caliber, like I said, with a 42-inch barrel. And this one, like I said, this one has small beaver tails on it, but the carving is simplified. The stock tang up here is much shorter on the buttstock than this model. So you can get a view of that too. You hold this one up here. You see how long the tang is on this for the butt plate. On this one it's simplified, and basically it was cost-saving measures. Another gun I want to talk about that is not a British arm, but you can see the influence of the British Brown Bess in this. This is the 1840 Potsdam, Prussia. Frederick the Great of Prussia. He saw what the British were doing with standardizing their arms. He decided to do the same thing. You still have similar carving, actually a little bit more elaborate in some places. This gun actually has the bayonet lug on the bottom and a sight with a small divot on the tang to act as a rear sight. Now the brass work is a little more elaborate. The side plate is smaller, narrower, with 3 screws, but the trigger guard has much more intricate work. And this gun was used by the Prussians from 1740 up to, I think, 1809. Roughly in that area. And as you can see here, I have quite a few second model guns. I have a variety. But the next model we're going to talk about, this is what is known as the India pattern. Was adopted by the British in, I want to say 1797. But with the outbreak of the French Revolution, they started purchasing them from the East India Company in 1793 and issuing them to the British troops. But this was the standard arm of the East India Company. They adopted it in 1771. Several of these were captured from British merchantmen, East India Company ships during the American Revolution, and some were actually issued to the Continental Army in a smaller number than the other ones, but the main difference being, instead of having a crown cipher on the lock, they had the East India Company logo. Now this gun has a 39-inch barrel, so you're going, again, shorter barrel, so you're using less metal, making it a little bit cheaper. The butt plate is a little bit smaller. The side plate is greatly reduced in size. All that is saving money for the East India Company. They were making a still durable musket, but in a much cheaper than what the British military was spending on their arms. And they're learning that the longer barrel length really wasn't going to the shorter barrel lengths, was not really affecting the accuracy of the weapons. And then one other gun I have here, which this is sold through reenactments as a ship's carbine. It's actually based on the 1790s heavy dragoon carbine, except the ramrod's not right. It should have a bulge here with a groove in it and a lip to keep it, and that would keep the ramrod captive on horseback. You have a 24-inch barrel, still the same lock, the East India style smaller side plate. And the French started using this style side plate early on, so a lot of the commercial guns that, even though they're Brown Bess style, would still have this style lock plate even earlier. So that's not a definite saying that it's definitely 1790s with the British marked guns, but earlier marked stuff would have been a little bit different. I'm starting to ramble here. And the last thing I want to talk about here, we were talking earlier about commercial guns. We have this right here. This is called a Fusil, F-U-S-I-L. It's missing its bayonet lug. I had a slight accident with it. If you look, it's got a simple brass band for a nose cap. Has a civilian style side plate on here, but the swell is more noticeable on this side. It's based off of the Brown Bess, but it's smaller. It's a 68 caliber. This would have been used if it was a fancier engraved gun, as an officer's gun, but they were also issued sometimes to sergeants, and light infantry companies would use these as a smaller, lighter weapon. It's got a 40-inch barrel, so it's shorter than the traditional Brown Bess musket, smaller bore, lighter. This gun's much lighter, and I purchased this gun from a native, so it's got this non-standard sling on it. So anyway, I hope you appreciate the video, and thank you. I'm gonna have